Lovely. So thank you very much for joining us today, Gail. If you'd like to introduce yourself and off you go.
Hi, I'm Gail and I run Ag Plus Biosecurity Specialists, and we offer a range of services. We do stable deep cleans, we do yard disinfects, we deal with infectious disease outbreaks, we write biosecurity plans, isolation policies and new horse arrival policies. We always do our new horse arrival policies in conjunction with vets because some vets prefer some vaccinations over others. We deal with water treatment, so well water, boreholes, horse box water tanks, rainwater harvesting. We sell Endosan disinfectant, and we are creating equine specific biosecurity signage at the moment as well.
Perfect. I saw a preview of your signage as well on social media the day, which looked brilliant. So I suppose starting off then, if we go back to basics, what are some of the most sort of basic and common things that people overlook but can easily make differences on, would you say?
I think the big differences for sort of your cohort, which is rehabilitation centres, is something simple like a boot dip at an entrance with a hand sanitizer for every visitor to use is going to really reduce your risk of infectious disease outbreak. It's worth noting, though, that no matter what disinfectant you use, you actually have to be stood in that disinfectant for long enough. It's not a quick dip and out. We like to say if you can sing the chorus to Staying Alive, which obviously was used for the How to Do CPR song, that is probably long enough to make sure that your boots have had a good coating of disinfectant.
Excellent. I remember when it was foot and mouth and people used to literally just sort of hop through it and that'd be about it. So yeah, proper stand in there, splash it over the tops of your wellies, that kind of thing, and then you're okay. All right. And what kind of risk or likelihood of risk is there? You said before we started about obviously the flu outbreak. How prevalent are they and how easy do they spread?
So flu particularly, we have it up and down the country and have a phenomenal amount of outbreaks this year. But what people probably don't realise is that it has a 3-kilometre airborne spread on a normal weather day. So you get a windy day and it's going even further. So if you stop to think in your head how many horses are within a 3-mile radius of you, that's quite a lot. And the best thing that we can do obviously is to vaccinate them. And certainly organisations are leaning towards advertising that horses should have vaccinations within 6 months, because we know that they tail off the further towards 12 months they go. So for a rehab yard, I think it'd be really important that they had up-to-date vaccination information, whether that's for horses coming to stay in or whether that's horses coming in as walk-ins and going again. It doesn't take 5 minutes for an owner to send a picture of a passport through on a WhatsApp with the vaccination details showing. And at this stage, I probably would be saying I wouldn't take any horses that weren't vaccinated because I think the risk is too high at the moment.
I think that's one thing we don't often do, is that we don't ask about vaccinations necessarily for our kind of work. And as a physio, if I'm going out and about as well, I wouldn't always ask before I put my hands on the horse, has it been vaccinated?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's something that we could introduce.
Yeah, so for you going out and about to different yards, one of the things that we're trying to encourage visiting professionals to do, and I had a show of hands on Saturday at a dental conference as to how many of those dentists sent their clients a terms and conditions, and not a single one. Now, terms are there to support you. I mean, they want to say, how you get paid, what your cancellation policy is. It's no good them cancelling in the morning and you've booked that slot money. So it's always better to have a cancellation policy. But in there, then you can put your expectations for biosecurity. And it's really a two-way street. What you expect from the owners. So you expect to be notified if they have ill horses on site. Now, that may or may not stop you from going, but you would choose potentially to go at the end of the day, so that you could then go straight home and get showered and wash and disinfect everything, rather than going on to another yard. Yeah, so that's probably one of the big things, is to have your terms and conditions, to let horse owners know what you expect from them, but also to say to them that you won't be coming to them from a yard that you knowingly cut from a yard that's got an infectious outbreak, and that your reasonable precautions are that you change coats between yards. So the equine dentists, they're all brilliant actually. They all wear a smock, and they change smocks between yards, and that's huge. That makes a big difference. And then if we can encourage people to disinfect their boots between yards and wash their hands, you're going a really long way towards protecting the wider equestrian community, but also yourself, your business and your reputation. Because unfortunately, if you were the one that was pinpointed as being the person that had spread something, that's going to damage your reputation. So I think you need to be showing that you are being proactive and doing something to prevent the spread.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we can all carry hand gel in the car and wash our hands fairly easily. And if there's a foot dip on site, you can do that when you're coming and going, which is quite nice. I didn't realise the dentist had smocks which they change so frequently. Are they sort of disposable ones that they bin, or are they just clothes they wash?
They're a bit like a hospital gown, so like a theatre gown, if you like.
Yeah.
If you're in the livestock industry, you see them with the white button-up ones. They've got a slightly shorter version. The ones that I've seen have actually gone over their head, but I'm sure they've probably got button-up or zip ones. And then they throw them in a bin bag after each yard. And then at the end of the day, you just pop them in the washing machine with some disinfectant. And that's huge, to be honest with you. Your key areas would be, for all of you, for dentists and for your guys, would be upper body, hands, and then feet. Lower body, legs and things, actually, unless you've had a horse, I don't know, lick you or something, that's at lower risk. So yeah, changing a smock. Now obviously in the winter that could be quite chilly. That you had 4 or 5 branded coats, and after each yard you threw them in a bin bag, tied them up, and then dealt with the day. It's a little bit more work, but it makes a big difference.
I suppose if they were to, as therapists, if they were to do all their in-house clients on certain days, and then maybe have the walk-ins on other days, that might help to know when the risks are as well.
It could separate them up. So say they had their in-house clients in the morning and their walk-ins in the afternoon. Doesn't really matter which way they do it, but try not to, and again, it's not an ideal world and there'll always be a time that you have to, but try not to intermingle them. You're visiting, for people who are going from site to site like yourself doing physio, a lot of my clients, and certainly our own physio, she carries a travel pack in her car of our disinfectant, and she sprays her boots between yards using that. So because unfortunately not enough yards, very few actually are offering any kind of boot dip for you to use. So you've got to be proactive and do it yourself, really. For your in-house yards, certainly my experience is probably a little bit 50-50. You've got some yards that have got a designated stabling area for the rehabbers, yards where they're all on the same yard. That does make it quite difficult, but not impossible to separate them. So if they're all together on the same yard, it would be a question of, you did the rehab horses last, if you like, as in feed everybody else, muck everybody else out, and then move on to them. Separate coats, again, could be used. Boot dip between the two areas. But the biggest single thing you can do as a rehab unit to protect yourself is to take horses' temperatures every day.
Right.
You can't isolate them. They're probably not even going to be in with you for 3 weeks. So therefore, you know, something like strangles, you wouldn't have them long enough to know whether or not they were incubating it. But by taking temperatures, you have a rise in temperature for 3 days before they become infectious. So generally, I mean, obviously none of these things are foolproof, but generally the guidance is hot before snot, which is from the Strangles campaign, and you've got 3 days to pick up an infectious disease and isolate that horse before the whole yard gets it.
Blimey,
So,
okay, so that quick recognition and action is what could save you, really.
Did nothing else but took temperature. If you didn't buy any disinfectant or have any clear signage or boot dips or anything else, temperature taking is crucial. The advice is that you take temperatures twice a day. Now, all of these things come down to staffing and time and practicality. So what I say to my clients is if you take temperatures at the same time every day, so say you took them every morning at breakfast, then if you go the next day and the temperature's risen, you've lost one of your 3 days. So you backtrack to the last normal temperature, and that gives you how much time you've then got to action something. The other thing, as well as having terms and conditions, is that, and again, we're seeing BHS yards have biosecurity plans because it's part of their remit, although they're very generic. But a lot of other yards don't have any kind of plan or policy. And actually, this is pretty key, because should something go wrong, you get this sick feeling in the pit of your stomach, a bit of a panic, and your mind goes blank. Whereas if you've got a policy in place that your staff have been trained on, then you have something to go to in that moment when you're feeling a little bit, oh my goodness, you know, this one's got a raised temperature and we're starting to see a snotty nose. What do I do? And they're in place, an action plan will reduce the spread. So rather than rushing around going, I don't know what to do, where do I put this horse? You know, do I call the vet first? Do I wait for the test results? Have a plan. And the answer is as soon as you think there might be anything at all wrong with a horse, you isolate it. Then you call the
how far you call the vet second. How far away do we need to isolate them, or how do we isolate them? So if I've got to the yard and I've seen there's a high temperature, we've got our policy, we know to isolate it. What is best practice in that situation then?
So what they're saying is, and obviously with an airborne, this is more difficult.
Yeah.
But this is a minimum of 10 feet between horses.
Oh, okay. So quite achievable for most yards then, hopefully.
Yeah. What I've done here when we've had new arrivals is, I mean, I've got a little row of wooden boxes. And so a new horse goes right on the end. And then, of course, unfortunately has to go out in the field for 3 weeks. That gives me a sort of a fire break, if you like, between the new arrival or the sick horse and the others. And then I just use string and a cone and cordoned the area off and put a sign on it, boot dip there and another coat and their own tools and equipment. And you can very effectively isolate very easily, very quickly. But it's something that needs some forethought, because the panic sets in. That's where mistakes are made. And the earlier you react, the more you can prevent the spread.
And I suppose people also sometimes in that panic jump to conclusions of, what should I do with all the other horses? What do or don't I tell other people?
Yeah.
And they can quite easily, I suppose, get a bit of hot water for either telling people too much or too little, moving other horses in the wrong direction or something, so they can make some silly mistakes then as well, possibly.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that we would discuss with a client when we do a biosecurity plan. You know, our policy is that you isolate straight away, then you call the owner, and you go into lockdown. But you wait, obviously the vet will confirm or deny that there's a problem. But it is worth closing the yard down just while you're waiting for those test results, because that's how things are spread, and spread very quickly. And we can stop it. We have successfully stopped strangles. We have isolated, because the yards in question have had policies in place, they've isolated to the one horse on big yards. And it is possible to do, but it's that quick reaction at the start. It's knowing what you're doing and thinking. The yards that I get called to disinfect after they've had an outbreak, they have left a horse in situ in its normal routine, waiting for the test results to come back.
Right. Okay.
By which time the whole yard's got it.
Yeah. And when you've isolated them and you've moved them away and you've done everything right, depending on what they possibly have, do you then have to sort of go back and disinfect everything they've touched within the last day or so? Or is it, if they're hopefully not infectious, you don't have to? How do you know when or not to go back and sort of see what they've touched?
I think what you can do here is, if you can isolate their equipment that they've used and they're stable, sort of close it down and don't touch it until you've got test results, and then obviously you can go in for a disinfect and a big clean. But that itself is a whole nother scenario to clean and disinfect after an outbreak. Can't just hit it with a pressure washer. There are steps to take. So again, that's something we would talk clients through, or if we're asked to do it, then obviously we would tell them how we're doing it and why we're doing it. So we've looked quite hard at the livestock industry and what they're doing, because they're streets ahead of the equine industry. Poultry units in the pig sector, they've had to nail down their biosecurity for some time now. And so in a cleaning scenario, you would disinfect first. You would then use a foaming detergent which traps pathogens as well as loose and organic matter, and then you would wash, because a pressure washer can aspirate a flu droplet up to 10 kilometers.
Wow. Oh, God.
You don't want to be getting the pressure washer straight away. You've got to make sure you think first.
And is that what a lot of people would potentially do then? It's sort of maybe spray things down, or just go straight to the pressure washer and hope that
unfortunately.
Yeah.
So from your yard's perspective, is one of the things that I get told a lot is, well, we don't have anywhere to isolate. We don't have in stable. It's just not possible. We've got a big barn and there's 24 horses in it. There is always something we can do. And a site visit will usually allow us to find an area that is suitable, or to put in the best case scenario in their layout as possible. And it might not be perfect, but it's doing nothing. We need to stop whole yards from getting infectious disease outbreaks. It's not necessary. We can isolate it. And the knock-on effect is that yards that have full outbreaks, it influences public perception, and public perception is one of the biggest problems with the equine industry at the moment.
Yeah, and how does that, or what examples have you got of that? Where is it that other professionals, so riders, coaches, therapists, whoever, are then reluctant to go back there because they lose faith in that yard being able to maintain security, or how does that affect their business?
I think the first thing is, and this has been very difficult to do, and some very brave yards have done this over the last 2 years, and it is changing the tide, is that you didn't used to tell anybody you had something like strangles because of the fallout that you got on social media.
Yeah.
Now, if it's handled correctly and you are honest from the start, you'll find that people are much more supportive. And realistically, professional people will understand that actually you're probably, once you've had the outbreak, the safest place to be anyway, because it's been and gone. And if it's handled properly and dealt with properly, there shouldn't be any problems at all. I think all yards need to do staff training on equine infectious diseases. And it's not just recognising symptoms. How long are they poorly for, or likely to be poorly for? Obviously, everyone's different. What's the recovery time? Because I think people don't appreciate that something like a virus, we've had viruses ourselves, you feel rotten for probably longer afterwards than you did when you were poorly, because your body has been left weak, and it's don't bring them back into work too soon. But also with most of these diseases, there's a post-infection shed time. So your horse is testing negative, but actually is still shedding the disease. And that is very overlooked.
Okay. And what are the main diseases we need to be thinking of? So you mentioned obviously strangles and flu so far as the main two we need to have on our radar. What else is up there, would you say, or is it those two?
No, EHV. So at the moment, obviously, we see a lot on social media about equine flu. Strangles has sort of almost been forgotten, but it's bubbling away quite nicely in the background. And also there is a slight increase in EHV this year as well.
And that's equine herpes virus, isn't it? Yeah.
Forms of it, not just the respiratory, the neurological, and the breeding version as well. EHV, I think if you spoke to your vets, EHV is the one they would prefer that you vaccinated against, because the fatalities probably are more than some of the others, strangles and equine flu. But obviously we all also need to be keeping our eye on the emerging diseases. So West Nile virus, there's been I feel like the powers that be are trying to introduce it slowly and quietly, but the threat is actually it's there, it's imminent. It's not something that's not going to happen. It is going to happen. When is anybody's guess, but it's something that we need to be a bit more prepared for. And behind that will become African horse sickness will follow, which is a bit scary. And also then you get the public almost turn off because you're banging on about strangles, you're banging on about flu. Suddenly you've decided there are two more, but actually it's, if you watch the spread of them across Europe, they're getting closer.
Because I remember being at college 20 odd years ago, learning about them, and it's that kind of distant thing that it's never really going to come here. It's very hard for it to get here. And as you say, those conversations now seem more common. And with the amount of horses traveling around the world with grooms and professionals moving around the world, it does feel like we're on borrowed time a little bit, doesn't it? And it's, yeah.
And rehab yard perspective, it's, and again, this is something we would advise that you have, is that you have an intake policy. You have a list of questions that you're going to ask. So my local rehab units probably won't ever see a horse that has travelled abroad. But, if you're down in somewhere like around the Hickstead area, is that a horse that comes in has been show jumping somewhere. So you need to know what their vaccinations are, when they last travelled and where they travelled to, because then that means that those horses you can monitor a little bit more, not closely, but you'll have a better idea that these are the ones that actually might throw you an anomaly. And it's just, history is very important before they come in. The same with your, really.
Same with what, sorry?
Walk-in ones as well, really. I get that that's time heavy, but if you could have something simple set up that you could send out that owners could reply to, some form, depending how people book, it's easier if you do these things through online and apps, because then you can set up email.
Well, we have been asked to work with companies, which we are doing, about what our hydrotherapists need to know to produce these booking sites. So we could add that in a little biosecurity section where people put in about passport, vaccinations and travel. That would be a really good bit, actually.
So we've created, and we did this, we work with a lot of the big private schools that have got horses on site, and obviously they all go home in the holidays, and you can't test them every single holiday. They go home for a week for half term, you can't just keep testing them. So we've created, and it's based on an FEI document, but we've created a version of an equine self-certification form, and that basically has that information on there, and they just have to email it across before they arrive. And it basically says that to the best of their knowledge, they haven't been anywhere in contact with an infectious disease. But it lists, there's a space there. So for instance, they've gone home for the summer holidays, they have to say each place that their horse has stayed overnight.
Right.
You know, so that could be useful for you guys as well.
I'm just making a note about that one. Yeah, self-certify is a brilliant idea,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah.
And then that's a simple document you can send out. Please, in your terms and conditions, your self-assessment form must be filled in and returned prior to arrival. And yes, it does take a second for somebody to just go and check that that's been done, and that there's nothing on it that would be of any concern. But if you've got an app on your phone, these things are so easy.
Yeah, and I think a bit like your own ID, a lot of people have copies of their horse's passport on their phone, don't they, or a photo of it that they can easily just upload if they need to, or check dates and stamps on it. Yeah, I think that's a really good one, especially with the booking side of things, because then at least you covered your back and you said, well, I did ask, and we've got the dates
Yeah.
that you put in, and people can't really hide from that.
Yeah, and I think unfortunately a lot of what we have to do is a little bit of covering our backs. Insurance companies will start to look at things differently. There's already sort of mumblings in the market, because as we get more and more of these infectious disease outbreaks and they're having to pay out a lot of money to yards, they're going to want to know that yards are proactive. And I think you'll find that they'll lean towards the yards that are being proactive and do have policies in place that they're following. Their premiums will be lower.
Interesting. And what do you think people are currently doing at the moment, from the people you've spoken to that have sort of rehab yards or livery type yards? What measures is the average yeah, taking?
Yeah, not enough.
No.
I think we've got to change our habits a little bit. And what I find with the yards that I work with that have got biosecurity policies is that, say we've done their biosecurity policy, we've worked with them for 12 months. When we come back to do their annual review, they're going, well, actually, we could do so and so now, because they've got into the habit of doing what they're already doing, and then they feel like they've got room to do a little bit more. And it just becomes part of your standard day to day. And we're not trying to make yards sterile, that's not possible. We're not trying to say you've got to strip clean everything on a daily basis. What we're saying is that 5 minutes here, 2 minutes there, a job once a week is going to really reduce your risk. And then once they get into the practice of that, we find that they're then happy to up level to something else as well.
Yeah, because the things you're asking aren't actually big changes. I think one of the changes, the smocks or changes of coats, would be harder, especially in the winter, as you said. But there's got to be ways around that, hasn't it? There's got to be some yard, as you say, making that effort. And you mentioned a spray for, oh God, sorry.
Going back to the smocks, so again, so we obviously come across quite a bit of resistance in the industry.
Yeah.
We get this with the quarantine stable. Oh, I haven't got anywhere to isolate. It's just not possible. Actually, it is. It's a little bit mindset. It is doable. You've just got to commit and decide you're going to do it. You could have 5 coats. How many yards are you going to go to in a day? I don't know, but potentially probably not many more than 5 coats. Throw them in a bag, stick them in a wash, go again, and just accumulate coats over time, or smocks for the summer. You haven't got to go out and buy them all at once necessarily, but we've all got enough coats kicking about, even if they're not branded ones.
Exactly. Yeah.